And people who didn't send good emails over time, I mean, if like they were too high level and they were not, if they show that they didn't know their function well, they weren't actually doing real work, then they'll be very quickly managed out. Like they're not even like an, A or B player. That's a C player in our view, right? Like, someone who couldn't like put together enough detail to like, to engage people,
Welcome to Tools for Tech Leaders, ideas for C-suite and tech exec decision makers. I'm Ian Tian, CEO and co-founder of Mattermost. I'm so excited today to be joined by my friend Raj Suri, the serial entrepreneur behind Lyft, Presto, and Lima. So Raj, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ian. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I think the reason why this podcast exists is because you did a podcast and I'm like, hey, I want to do one too. And I basically, we work with the same vendors and I just learned a lot from you. So really appreciate you being like a co-founder of this one too.
Oh, thanks. That's high praise. Yeah, it's fun to do podcasts. It's a great format. I really enjoy doing ours, and hope to have you at some point as well on that one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's this is actually podcasting is one of the topics I think a lot of tech leaders are thinking about. Right, so many people are on social media, so many people are on LinkedIn. We're all brands for our company. So, like when you think about like podcasting, like what are a couple of things that you've learned? As you kind of started, I'm sort of following your footsteps.
I think podcasting is really, really a great way to get to know people and quite a wide variety of people. A lot of folks, it actually in some ways like takes away the awkwardness of like just chatting with people because like, we're all very busy, right? Our podcast is Founders in Arms. It's really focused on founders. Founders are super busy. And like, you almost never get the luxury of like just sitting down with a founder one-on-one and just chatting. And especially talking about work, right? Like, because when founders like want to chill, they often don't want to talk about work that much, right? So like, we live very stressful, jobs and stuff. But in a podcast format, people are very happy to talk about work and like talk about, their overall views of things. Like, I find like the conversations you have are quite delightful in a podcast format, and so that's actually the number one thing I like about it is like the conversations are incredible, and in many cases you meet people that you can keep talking to for a long time, right? But you wouldn't find the reason to otherwise. So that's been great, and then also I got a chance to meet people probably I wouldn't have met or spent time with anyways, right? Like, I think a lot of people get together for the reason of the podcast. So it becomes a reason to gather people that makes sense. It's bigger than each of us, right? Like we want to pass on knowledge to the world and inspire other people. So people are willing to dedicate time to that where they may not want to spend that much time just doing a random coffee meeting. Like founders don't do it as much as VCs. VCs randomly grab coffee with each other, but like we don't have time for that. So we don't do that much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the conversations. I learned so much for them. And like, it's like these ideas of these experts and it's so dense. And for us, we do a little bit more cybersecurity and sort of general tech. We have like exec coaches on and like public company execs. Usually we do it when they're out of that role because they're not like the main limelight. But I just learned so much. It's really incredible. Like if you had to like think, because I listen to your podcast and you've got great, like you go very broad and you have sort of founders, but very broad in the different disciplines. Mm-hmm. What are like one or two sort of surprising things that you kind of like, oh, like this is interesting?
We've had a lot of very interesting surprises. One thing, we interviewed a guy called Sahil Lavingia recently who, he founded a venture-backed startup called Gumroad, got funded by Kleiner Perkins, for 7 or 8 million. It was a very hot round back in the day. And then, he kept growing, but didn't grow fast enough to raise his next round. So he didn't do the triple, double as, everyone wants to see, but he grew like 80% or something. It's good enough, right? For most of us, but not for his next round. And, instead of just shutting down the company or even just selling it, he kept running it, and, 10, 15 years later, he's still running this company, right? Profitably. And the cool thing, really surprising thing was that Kleiner Perkins sold back their stake for like $1, which is something that I was shocked to see, like a VC firm selling back their stake to the founder, which actually makes a lot of sense if you think of the VC model where like, VCs have to like, basically rely on 1 out of 10 companies to like, 10x or 100x, and that returns the fund and more, right? But if a company's not going to be one of those companies, they want to actually just like reduce their time on that company, right? They want to focus on like, finding the next, sort of like mega unicorn or decacorn or whatever they call it these days. So the Kleiner Perkins sold back the stake for $1. That seems like financially crazy to most people, especially since the company's doing well now, and they're doing a 5-10 million a year, and they're dividending out in terms of profit, right? But that doesn't make any difference to Kleiner Perkins. They don't care. They want to get the $10 billion outcome, right? So more VC firms should do that. But these types of stories are not told, right? About how VC firms are giving up stakes. I don't think these stories are well publicized. So we did a LinkedIn post about it, and we got over 250,000 views, on this LinkedIn post. Yeah, so it's cool to see how some of these founder stories are could maybe help people in their own negotiations with VCs and down the line maybe as well.
I think, as sort of founders, we can with other founders, we got a lot of stories on the side, but I think sharing that on a podcast is pretty amazing. So that is a phenomenal story. 250,000 views. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done. All right. Well, I'd love to learn about you and all the sort of battle scars you've had. I mean, you've done some really amazing things. You've done some really difficult things. You've done some really fun things. And I'd love to just dive in. So similar to you and me, we're both Canadian American. And we both went to University of Waterloo, had slightly different paths. So, one of the stories that's pretty amazing is Zimride and Lyft. So for all the Waterloo grads and Canadian Americans out there, what does that story look like? How did that start? And, can it happen? And can it happen in Canada? What is that? What was that all about?
Yeah, I actually started that at Waterloo in my last year, as an engineering student there. I had this itch to start things. I took these classes with a professor named Larry Smith, who you may be familiar with. He's a legendary professor at Waterloo, who I wish was world famous. I wish everybody could listen to his lectures and just live stream. Because he made economics. He was an economics professor, really compelling, and he not only just told the stories about the supply and demand, but about how companies dealt with various economic turbulence and about the stories of how to build great companies that survive these the turbulence, and those stories made me completely change my career direction. I wanted to be a doctor, right? Professional, like a good Indian kid, right? That was the dream that my parents had incepted into my brain. But when I heard Larry Smith's lectures, it made me want to be an entrepreneur, because I wanted to build empires. I wanted to, I wanted to fight these fights that he was talking about and go through that. And he inspired me to take an economics degree alongside my engineering degree, so I learned more about the business side as well as the the engineering side, which I highly recommend to all technical people out there. I know you also went to Stanford Business School, right? So, you also have that kind of combination of engineering and business, which is, I think, so crucial. And after that, once I it's like a one-way door. Once I had taken that class, I was like, okay, I only want to be an entrepreneur. So I was always thinking of ways to do things. My first entrepreneurial venture was Canada's first student think tank. It was a nonprofit based in Waterloo, where it's called the Forum for Independent Thought, where we gather students to kind of solve the world's most difficult problems. Very optimistic, very idealistic, but it was based on this frustration that a lot of things that people study in school are actually not relevant to real life. They just make work, right? But we're students can do so much more than this. There's a lot of talented people at Waterloo. Why can't we do something more with that energy? And then after I did that, I wanted to really do a startup. And so I had the idea for Zimride when I was driving back from Waterloo to Toronto one day. It's about an hour and a half drive. And, I was using my family van, right, which was like a 7-seater van. And I was alone in the car. And this was a long weekend for Thanksgiving or something. And, it's ridiculous to drive alone when you have a 7-seater van and everyone needs to get to Toronto for the weekend, because that's the major city, right, in the area. And I thought, well, geez, why am I driving alone? I would love to be able to talk to more people who need to get a ride. I'd love to be able to split gas money. And I was like, there's a problem here that I don't know who else needs a ride, and I don't have an easy way to connect with them. And, that's how the idea started. It's well, if there was an easy way, maybe using Facebook, which had just come out at the time, for me to connect with other people who I know or in my network, I would definitely offer them a ride, right? And it'd be a win-win for everyone. So that's what got the idea started. And so it started basically as a carpooling app on the Facebook platform. Um, and I called this other guy working on something similar, who's Logan Green, who was a longtime CEO of Lyft. He was similar age as me, last year of school, or just graduated from UCSB in California. We actually didn't even meet for the first few months of the company in person. We were working completely remotely before Zoom, and we were just chatting on like messenger apps, like GChat and stuff like that. And we built this amazing collaboration just over the phone and on chat. And we coded the first app together. We eventually got funded for Facebook. We added some more people, got our first angel investment. I really got started that way. And, it was a really special and very lucky event for like a young entrepreneur like myself. Like, my first company being, a consumer brand, iconic consumer brand like Lyft has been a very lucky thing for my career.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, just, you never know how things are going to start. So, what was it like when you thought about, that was your first company? Like, what were like one or two things that like you learned or you were surprising, or like people can, sort of pick up from that?
Yeah, I think one thing is if you're a technical person, definitely branch out and like explore as many other things as you can. Often I find with technical people, like once you're skilled enough to like, once you're good at math, you're going to be good at math forever. You're going to be good at technical stuff forever. So like, it's like go and explore other things and learn about other things, because at some point school just keeps teaching you like new forms of math, like later I did a PhD at MIT, and like, it was just the same stuff. It was just like harder math, right? Like, or just different types of math. It's like how much, unless you want to like become like a math academic, like you don't need to keep doing that, right? So it's like you can learn other things, and most people who are good at math have high IQs and can do other things. So that's one thing I just tell other technical people is like your floor is pretty high, so like don't just constrain yourself to like doing engineering, right? So that's one thing, and I think Waterloo does a really good job at that, because it's like because of the co-op program, you get exposure to so many different areas of like the real world that it forces you to like expand your horizons, right? But even places like MIT and other technical schools, like they don't do a good job of like forcing you to expand your horizon. So that's one thing. And I wouldn't have ever got to starting these companies if I didn't do that, right? And then the other thing is like, once you start like, these companies, really, try to enjoy the journey. It's a bit cliched, but like, I've enjoyed almost every aspect of like building companies. And, working with people you really like I had a great relationship with Logan. I'm still friends today with him, is also really important. So like when you find co-founders, like try to find people you really get along with well, and then everything else tends to work out. I think that's the other bit of advice I would think of.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. Your Larry Smith comment made me think I had Larry Smith. I actually looked him up when I was in Waterloo again, and I took him out to dinner just to like hang out with him, which is awesome. And
that's cool.
Yeah, but like I forget, I was a student. We took him to like the Duke of Earl or something at that bar. And he's like, we were having dinner. He's like, the food here is terrible. I'm like, I didn't realize that because I was a student.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's funny. When was this? When did you take him out to dinner?
Oh, I don't know. It was got to be like a decade ago. Like
a decade ago. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think he's still
teaching, right?
Yeah.
I might hit him up at some point. He still responds to my emails. So.
Oh yeah, you should totally do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were your co-ops? Where did you work?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I worked at 6 different companies. So I wasn't like one of these guys who just worked at the same company. I don't recommend that. I worked at like everything ranging from like a tiny startup, working on like cleaning wastewater in Mississauga, to Ontario Power Generation, which is a big government utility. Worked at ExxonMobil, which is called Imperial Oil in Canada, and also worked at Procter & Gamble in a tiny town called Brockville, Ontario, 20,000 people. What else? I worked at Magna International, which was an auto parts company. It's quite famous now. I think they just did a big deal with Tesla or someone recently. And then there was another company. Let's see, Procter & Gamble, ExxonMobil. Yeah, there's another one I'm forgetting probably because there's 6 co-ops, right? But overall, what the co-ops taught me, one of my startup ideas, like I have a long list of 25 other startup ideas, is like, how do you bring co-op to other places? Like, how do you make co-op universally available? Even for high school students. I think high school students should do co-op too. And if any student ever asks me for like an internship, I always try to give it to them. Like that's something I do, just like to give back. It's hard for like kids to find internships, and like they're hungry for experience. Like I think one of the best things any business leader could do is like give a student or like a young person the first internship. So like you find stuff for them to do. There's tons of stuff to be done at companies. And it's in one of my networks. Like right now, like my former CFO's son is working, helping us with Tribe, right? But there's other like one of my nephews needs his internship. I'll give him an internship too. So that's something I recommend to everyone to do.
That's awesome. So you got this ton of different experiences. You've got Zimride and Lyft. And then how did you find yourself at Presto? That seems like something you've really put your heart and soul into. Like, what was the idea? How did you get started? How did that business come about?
Yeah. So I got into this program, a PhD MBA program at MIT, and it was too good to pass up. It was like 4 people in the world were accepted into it. It was a very selective program. It was like a full free ride, basically at MIT. So I went to the program, and I quickly started missing startups. I was like, I really enjoy the startup life, right? And I actually much prefer it, even though MIT is a great brand and blah, 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 right? And there's great people there and great talks. So there's so many good things about MIT, which I still love. But like startups are really like where my heart was at that point. And then so I had the idea for Presto when I was having dinner at a restaurant in Harvard Square, which is Cambridge near MIT, and with several other engineers from MIT, some of my classmates. And we had a great dinner, but then it came time to split the check between us. And, there were 7 of us. And for the life of us, we couldn't figure out how to do it. It took us an hour to figure out how to split a check between 7 MIT engineers. And, these guys are doing like, advanced thermodynamics and, some of the hardest math in the world. And I was like, geez, the iPhone had just come out. You're like, wow, the technology is getting so good. And yet we can't split a check easily between us. And I realized there was a huge separation between how advanced digital technology was getting versus physical technology. Like there's this big gap between digital and physical worlds. And I was like, what if there was a company that was just focused on making it easier for physical industries to adopt technology, right? That was like the basic idea. It's like connection between physical and digital. That problem is a huge problem, and it still continues to this day, right? Like there's like companies, like there's like massive companies in this space today, right? And so we started off, with this idea of like building customized tablets for the restaurant industry, so guests could order and pay from their seats without waiting. That actually took off after 4 or 5 years. So it was 4 or 5 years of grinding. We got Y Combinator in 2010. We got some restaurant people to invest in our company, but then we finally sold our first big deal to Applebee's after 2 years of a pilot with them. And then after that, Chili's bought it, Denny's bought it at some point, Red Lobster, all the big chains started to adopt this tablet, which, is still there today. You can still see tablets in Applebee's and Chili's if you go there today, make it easier to order and pay and play games while you wait. But in 2018, we started getting, okay, what's the next iteration going to be? And we started working on AI stuff. So we started working on computer vision and voice AI. This is, 4 or 5 years before ChatGPT even, gets launched. And in the pandemic, all restaurants were shut down. So our revenue would basically be going to zero. And we're like, well, we got to do something else. And so we pivoted to this idea of voice AI for drive-thrus, because drive-thrus were still open. And voice AI could make it easier for restaurants to take orders so that, even in labor shortage conditions, they can take orders and they can, be more productive and they can upsell better. And that product took off, and we were able to go public in 2022 based on this idea. And again, we went public even before ChatGPT came out. So, this is like before this AI craze. And then after that, that momentum of the AI stuff really helped us. And, we landed many big deals as well for the voice AI thing. And the company is still doing voice AI today. So I left just after taking it public. But it's, it's company still focused on AI stuff for restaurants today, including, I think computer vision, phone ordering, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then as you're running the company, like I'm just, curious about for different leaders, like how do you run your one-on-ones? How do you run your leadership team meetings? What sort of metrics, dashboards, your quarterly meetings? Like what's your sort of cadence? What's your sort of toolkit? Like, and if there's things that sort of evolved to where it sort of ended up to where you kind of started off? Like, how's that sort of management OS for you?
Yeah, I was really deliberate about that. I'm sure you are too. I'd love to compare notes actually. It took me like, I've been a CEO now for almost, 20 years, something like that, right? So, and for a long period of time, I was managing a venture-backed company at some level of scale, 100 people plus, right? Um, and I found it took me like 8 years to really learn how to be a good manager, a good CEO. I think there was like a pretty big learning curve for like a technical background person to be at, and eventually started like codifying all of my thoughts, like management thoughts, in a series of memos that basically became like a constitution for our company, right? Um, and I realized that I have to be very deliberate, very thoughtful, very intentional about everything I did, and like, if it's working, write it down and then make it like a standard. If it wasn't working, adapt it, and so I actually did have one-on-ones with my team scheduled, unlike Jensen, right, and some of these other people, no one-on-ones. But many times I didn't do them. So there was just like a time for like, if we needed to talk, we could talk, right? And if there was something pressing, we could talk. What I found was for every new executive, like in the first month or two, you have to be talking quite intensively, right? But if the executive is working out after like a couple months, like you're confident the executive is good, and they're confident that the company is the right fit for them, then you don't really need to talk that much after that. And I operationalized everything into written reports. So weekly reports that were written not just by my executives, but by their staff as well. And I read every single report in detail that was coming on basically in every aspect of the business. So like, there was not really any stone unturned. And, in our business, just everything was in writing, everything was in email, very carefully documented. And then, Slack was used a lot in our company. So we had everything was in writing, and I encourage people to put things in writing, at some companies, they don't like that, right? Because of threats of lawsuits and things like that. But like, and also just people have more of a verbal culture. But I had a written culture, and I found it very efficient because it meant you had to spend very less time in meetings and more time you could read, which is relatively fast. So these simple things like, yeah, you have one-on-ones with exec if needed, but it's all time on the calendar, but it doesn't, you don't need it past a certain stage. And then, you have written reports from like every director level and above in your company. I found that was a great way to manage a company, a very efficient way. And it worked really well, I think.
Oh, yeah, super interesting. I loved it. Like, the hack for me that has been transformative is when I get a new executive, they basically, for like 1 month, they're in like all my meetings, right? Including one-on-ones, right? So I'll have one-on-ones. And I go back and forth on having one-on-ones, and I travel a lot, but like, they just like shadow me for like 30 days. And what that does is like, there's just a ton of context that like, I just can't transfer that much context, but they're sitting with me because like, and that's kind of a trade-off because like sometimes you want the exec to jump into whatever they're doing. But I think it's just been great because then there's so much like shared knowledge that afterwards, similar to you, that we don't have to spend that much time because we kind of like mind meld it, right? And when you step in office, right, then you just be in the office all the time. So I think with digital, you just get this like big opportunity to like see everything.
Are you guys like in person or remote? What's your culture?
Yeah, it's remote. So we have, we're pretty distributed. My leadership team is distributed, but like I prefer us to be with customers than like to ourselves. We do quarterly offsites, and then we have like a physical office in like Palo Alto, and then our Fed subsidiary. So there's like, there's physical offices, and we have quarterly offsites and things. But yeah, just generally, digital.
What do you think of this Y Combinator insistence? Like everyone has to be in person and like, SF. It feels like they're trying to push a culture of like in person in the office.
I mean, both going through YC, I think it's absolutely valuable to be in person, right? Like there's two things. Either the best is everyone's in person. The second best is everyone's remote. The worst is hybrid. The worst is like there's people in this office, there's the people in this office, there's tribal knowledge, people don't write things down. Like the worst is hybrid. So yeah, the best is all in person, but it's like for us, we have a lot of customers around the world. It's hard for us all to be in person.
Yeah. I think that's true though for a lot of companies, right? Like it's unless you're like a robotics company where you have to be building something together physically, most of the people will have customers distributed, right? And like there'll be reasons to be distributed. Especially in the pandemic, everyone had to be distributed. So we're still kind of recovering from that. It's hard to be fully all in person, I think.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of like the natural these days. I mean, what my early days were at Microsoft, right? And being in person as a college hire was invaluable. Like they just have so much learning from like just sitting in meetings, being in the hallways, being in the cafeteria, right? Like it was, and I don't know what that's like as a new grad today. The climate with like AI and remote work, I think it's just very different. It's very, I think it's I in my mind, it's like so much more difficult than when I was entering the workforce.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of information though that are on these chat apps like Slack, And so, I mean, that's the way a lot of work gets done, which didn't happen when probably we were like doing co-ops, right? Like it wasn't like all this information happening in like a centralized chat app. Um, and, so I think that is one way I think young people can learn today. Of course, there's a lot of Zoom calls as well to join. There's like, yeah, so I don't know if it's that bad. I mean, I feel like young people are okay. This is my view, even in a remote environment.
Yeah. I think no matter what, you'll be able to sort of adapt. It's just different. Like for me, it was a lot of the lunchtime conversations. And I was different at Microsoft. You had a lot of distribution lists. So distribution lists was kind of like the instant messaging of the time. And you just have like these, boom, like all these different topics you can just kind of dive into. So, but that lunchtime conversation is something that I feel like a lot of decisions get made at lunch, at least in my group.
Yeah. Yeah. There was like in a good culture, you could learn a lot. I agree. Like, I remember now the time I was at ExxonMobil, we had a really strong plant manager, a leader for I was working in an oil refinery. He used to have these daily like leadership meetings started at 7 a.m. sharp, every day. The work hours there were crazy. It was like 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something. It was like, people worked hard at Exxon, right? But his leadership meetings taught me a lot about leadership and how to run, a team. And like, how we dealt with crises and things like that were interesting as well. Yeah. I think, something that you don't necessarily see that, without an in-person environment, I guess.
What's that look like? Like what is dealing with crises? Like what you see?
Well, I noticed how he like dealt with like people like in his team getting emotional and even going after each other like in meetings, and how he like diffused situations. There was a situation where we had like some health emergency or like some safety emergency, which is a big deal, at a oil refinery. And like he took it very seriously. He got to the bottom of it, but he didn't blame anyone. He took ownership, right? Like, it taught me a lot about like, the culture of leading. And you got to work. You got to work super hard and get to the bottom of things. B, you got to take ownership. You don't blame other people. And when other people start playing the big game on each other, you diffuse those situations. I think those types of things, which when you see them in a work environment, like they can be inspiring to a young person.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that is, yeah, the diffusing things is just so, yes, I'm 100%. I'd love to just kind of go back to that concept of your operating system and how to get those written reports for director levels and above. Like, what are your prompts? Is there a word limit? Like, how do you cut? Like, some people are too terse, some people are too verbose. Like, how do you train people? Do you give feedback? Do you give notes? Like, how do you?
Yeah,
I think I want to try that. Like, walk me through it so I can clip this and send it to my own company.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there is, it became a cultural thing. So people saw other people's reports and started like basically copying them. Right. But we had like one or two reports in the beginning that basically seeded everything that I really liked. And then I kind of used them as templates. The key thing is, we had like, for example, account management reports. You have account by account breakdowns of how each account's doing. So the account leader, director of accounts, right, would like summarize, here's what happened with this account this week, right? Like, here's the conversations we had, here's how they're doing on the business side, blah, 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 just like a summary for that account, and then the next account, and then this account. And they would also put some general like highlights and lowlights from the week, So basically that would be at the top of the email, and then later on it would be the account by account breakdown. You had a customer success like sort of email which had all the key adoption metrics of the product, across different, different accounts and different customers. And again, calling out things. The emails were where they had to call things out. If something wasn't called out in the email, I would assume it's okay. But if something that was happening that they were worried about, it wasn't called out in the email, that was like a very scary thing to me, then like I would give that person feedback. I'm like, why didn't you report this bad news, right? Like you want the culture of like people reporting bad news in the emails, right? Like something that's worrying them, right? Otherwise, it could become a much bigger deal down the line, right? So these emails were definitely not rah emails. They were very to the point. In fact, the culture that we had was very much the opposite, where people were pointing out problems as much as possible. So, um, and so yeah, hardcore metrics, but also qualitative information. Um, and there could be an attachment or two with more raw data inside if people want to dig into the raw data. And there were pretty wide distributions of the emails. There was no siloing of information. So it was like basically like the entire leadership team would be copied on all the emails. And we had like a big leader. We had 30, 40 people on the leadership team, of team at 250, I think we were when I left. So I think overall it worked pretty well. I don't think there was any downside to it. I think there was only upside. People felt included, and people felt in the know of what's going on in the team. So there was no transparency. Like earlier on as a CEO, people would be like, are we being transparent enough or just siloing information? There was none of that. We didn't have any of that. Everyone kind of trusted each other too, because they saw each other's reports. So it really worked well, I think.
Oh,
and
it's
it's
amazing.
pretty efficient for everyone.
I totally want to do that. Okay, so you said there's a couple of variations that you had. So highlights and lowlights, we do a similar format for that. We do it monthly rather than weekly, but it'd be interesting to do weekly. It's like, look, take 20 minutes, just tell people what's going on, no surprises. So you got account reviews, some customer success. Like, how did you, like, other than highlights and lowlights, like, how would you sort of like require the structure? Would they be on their own, or would you have like a template that they'd follow?
I didn't have a standard template. I left it a little bit to the executive to do, but I just wanted enough detail in there. So like exactly how they formatted, I didn't care. I did want like detail by account and detail even like for the product team, I'd want it by product. I want everything that's relevant, and there were a few issues where they went into like if they went to too much detail, I'm okay. Like that's fine, but I didn't want less detail. So that's the thing about these emails. They have to be detailed. They have to really go like, and people, because reading is so efficient way to consume information, I think, versus a meeting, right?
Yes.
And so like extra detail is actually welcome in these emails. And I felt like, over time, the emails got more detailed and they got more useful as a result. So, I think, I can't think of there's anything like in terms of like, a format that didn't work, except if it was too high level and too like just like qualitative and didn't include metrics. The thing was also, if you read an email from someone that was too high level, there was an immediate suspicion of that. Like, are they doing actual work? Like, it is like the Elon thing is like this, right? Like the Elon's asking for like these weekly reports, right? Because you can actually tell, like if they know their function, they're going to write it down, right? If they don't know their function, you get these high level reports and they're like, what is this email? And I would ping people directly. So if I got an email, because I read every email, right, I would like reply to them. I'm like, what's happening here, right? And so they knew I was reading their emails. So they had an incentive to make sure they were quite detailed, right? And people who didn't send good emails over time, I mean, if like they were too high level and they were not, if they showed that they didn't know their function well, they weren't actually doing real work, then they'll be very quickly managed out. Like they're not even like an, A or B player. That's a C player in our view, right? Like, someone who couldn't like put together enough detail to like, to engage people,
How did you find with engineering? Like, I just find engineering sometimes needs a little bit more guidance, like to summarize, because I think, did you have different disciplines with sort of like marketing, like spot on, like such a great communicator, and some other ones that were just not sure what you wanted to hear?
Engineering was decent too. The problem with engineering is that it's less consumable by the rest of the team because they they don't know what's going on. So the challenge is, how do you make it consumable, for the rest of the team? But engineers were required to report on sprints and what percentage of tickets that were assigned to them they completed, things like that. And, things that were happening in different offices or different teams that, that were relevant for people to know. Any upcoming infrastructure work, any upcoming, changes to like the schedule, because everyone wanted the release out at the right time, right? That's a big thing. right? And a high quality release. What's the progress of the QA? People would read that, like, how's QA going? We had a very intensive QA process because we're enterprise, right? Enterprise sales. So QA is like everything, make or break, right? Um, it is harder with engineering because it's less consumable, but it's still as important. Overall, I think this is a good culture for everyone in the team, and even engineering.
Yeah, thank you. That is, man, I totally want to do this like right now.
I do think the weekly thing is important. Like, I think it's really important. What I've noticed is like the more regular your cadence of anything, the better it is in general, right? And like the more people focus in on things. I think the weekly is really important. And like if people missed a weekly email, that would be a bad thing in our company. Like that would be like, again, people start asking questions like, why isn't this person sending an email? Like there's like serious questions. And they would generally, like, if someone is going on vacation, they can assign it to another member of their team.
Yeah.
Right. But if they didn't send an email at all, that is a big problem, because it shows like they're just not on top of their stuff.
Okay. So this is, okay, great. I really want to start up, just figuring out how to start it. So it's just like, okay. I mean, is it like, I think the most famous one is like, what did you get done this week? But is it, how did you phrase it? Like, what was the title of the email?
I can try to dig up some of my some of the emails. I'll probably send you the ones I was most impressed by.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I can forward it to you. I'm surprised other companies don't do it. I don't know if other companies do it or not, because I ran the company for 15 years. So it was like, I didn't have much context of what happened outside the company, but like, everyone who joined the company was forced to do this. Like, this is the only way to do things in our company, but I'm happy to send things. Do you know if other companies do this? Like, is this like a common thing or not?
I think some of the companies in the news do it, right? Like, sort of like weekly summaries. I think it's pretty common for a lot of companies. I think that, yeah, but I think we should maybe bring it back. The question is like, I think that for me, it's like the consistency, right? Like and for you, you basically have like, well, if you can't write a concise sentence if you can't write a concise summary of what you're doing on a weekly basis, then, it's basically cultural misfit, right? It's saying like, that is one of your cultural values, is to be able to do this broad communication, which basically takes down silos, which everyone's on the same page, you're updated. But it's an investment, right? So you got how many people? 30 people on the leadership team. How many people are writing? Is it also 30? So is it 30 times 30?
Yeah, well, some of them reporting to each other. So like, like, for example, the account management team will be reporting to our CRO, maybe, right? So the CRO may not actually do the email. It might be the account management team sending out the email. Customer, like, so it won't be one for the CRO. The CRO actually didn't do like it was mostly director and VP level and not like C level, I would say.
So director and VP level that are sort of like functional leaders, and like this is reporting on the function, and it's sort of broad. And then, okay, yeah, great. And then basically you seed it with a couple of good examples, and everyone's on board with those examples when you start going. Yeah.
Then it becomes just a cultural thing, right? Then people see other people doing it.
We actually had someone that actually was doing it because it helps them focus. And I didn't really, what I really should have done is latched onto that and be like, hey, this is a great example. Let's all do it. So I think I'm gonna go back and do that. This is really good. And then tell me about like, what's the response? Because it goes out to the whole distribution. Are you replying to each one? Are other people replying? Do they become discussion threads?
Yeah, other people do reply. And I don't reply to each one, but I read everyone and I'll reply occasionally, right? And I think just occasionally is good enough, because it's like, it shows that you're reading it, right? And in meetings, people will quote the emails, right? So they'll be like, oh yeah, in your email, I said this. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have one email that you sort of keep replying to, or is it like a new email every week with different subject lines?
It would basically say something like, weekly sales update, with the date, right? From like, this date. That's basically what it would do. And then, if something was question mark, you'll reply, sometimes you'll reply all, sometimes you'll just reply to the person with their executive copied, right? People need to know you're paying attention, right? As a CEO. And even on Slack, like I used to read every Slack message, I would like, emoji things, even if I didn't reply, like people would see that I'm like engaged. And like, I think it worked pretty well because they know that like someone's paying attention, right? And when people know that they have the visibility, it motivates them.
Would you say every Slack message in a 250 person company, is that certain channels, or is that like?
Well, the ones that the main public channels. I don't read like people's private messages, but like, like the main public like channels, I would read them. Yeah, I would basically read them all. And, um, I would be active on channels too. I think, like I wouldn't hesitate to be involved in any given channel. So yeah, but that, that's kind of what founder mode is about. You got to be involved, right? You got to know the details.
Yep, 100%. Awesome. So you got this, public. So you've gone 2 year startups doing pretty well. Went public, and like you got some new ones. So like, and I'd love to hear about like what's it like, kind of going from being a CEO with a management team and organization to sort of like that early stage all over again.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know you'll empathize with it. Because it's a very different life, like once you have like established like a management team and you have an established company and revenue and stuff like that, like you almost don't have work to do that much, right? Because the company is running, and the company is running well. And if you have good execs, which I did, at Presto, and they're all doing great things now as well. And like they, you can feel very grateful for like these people and like, the great work they do. They're very motivated. So, but I do think there's a sense of boredom that comes with that too, as like a founder. You're like, okay, your team is doing good things, and like, what do I do now, right? You still have a lot to contribute, and you don't want to get in the way of your execs. But I actually, I had a successor named, at my company who was going to step up and take my role. Unfortunately, the board went a different direction after I left. I don't think that worked out well, but like, I took a lot of pride in running a good team and a good company. I think that was really important to me. I also, though, as a creative person, I think I'm a creative person. Like I like to work on hard problems like myself as well. I got a little bit bored, and I was like, I wanted to get back into building, building product stuff. And the product we iterated to at Presto was just actually quite easy. I think quite an easy product. It's like a voice AI for drive-thrus. We were doing computer vision stuff and some other things. And also, they're not that complex. I think it's relatively straightforward to build some good things in that space. So I wanted to get back to building stuff. And that's what I did. So, I started 2 new companies, started a podcast. One company is like Hardcore Services, which we're helping high-skilled immigrants come to the U.S. We're trying to recruit the best talent to come to the United States, and something I wish the United States did better, which is like treat their talent better and try to attract new talent to come here. Versus some of the rhetoric that's seen these days. Is like, oh, well, we don't really know if we want high-skilled talent. Why don't we give Americans more, responsibility? I think the truth is that the country's powered on immigrants. And we need to bring great people here that actually forces everyone to raise their game, and pay a lot of tax dollars, etc. So that's one thing I'm doing. Something I really care about. I'm an immigrant myself. You're an immigrant as well, right, to the U.S. So something we want to do is help immigrants succeed in the U.S. So that company's called Lima. I co-founded it with my wife and actually another Waterloo guy called Rahul. He's so someone I went to undergrad with, and then the other company is called Tribe, which is trying to reinvent group chat. We're competing with WhatsApp, and we're trying to just rethink what group chat can be. I think group chat at its best is like a permanent dinner party where it's like you're in a room with several people and you get to know them over a period of time. You see their messages and you talk about things you care about. It can really deepen existing relationships and friendships, and it can also help you meet new people. And before I started Tribe, I led a lot of groups on WhatsApp. I realized that group chats are amazing and they can really have a big impact, but B, the platform and the culture on WhatsApp doesn't enable, a great group chat experience 99% of the time. High 90s% group chats on WhatsApp are like either dead or just spammy, And I think there's like a healthy balance that can make a group chat like transformational for people's lives. And I've been on transformational group chats. So I realized that at its best, a group chat not only helps you deepen like your human connection with other people, but also helps you learn more about things and deepen connection to your interests. So if you might have some interest, say it's like you're interested in golf and you know a little bit about golf, well, it's hard to deepen that interest sometimes if you're not around other people who also are interested in golf. And sometimes maybe you're more interested than you are. If that was the case, you would get more interested in golf and you would feel more fulfilled as someone who likes golf, right? And it's the same with that for so many different things. So started building this app Tribe, have a great team working on that, designers, engineers. I love the getting back to building, even though I don't have an executive assistant now. I don't have a management team. I don't have any executives. But it feels great to be in the details, and it feels great to be building a product that I would use myself, and I hope other people will use as well, and that my family and friends, would love. So I really enjoy that piece of it. And one thing I'm trying not to do with Tribe is grow too fast, like from a team perspective, whereas that's a very different culture. It's not a venture-backed company. It's my own money and some angels and stuff. So like basically it's we're trying to be very efficient at how we build this app. And I want to build it in a very intentional way without getting on that treadmill, the VC treadmill, which I think can be damaging to a lot of companies. It kind of creates incentives to hire people you don't need. So we're doing it very differently this time, much less corporate too. I mean, I don't know about you, but at some point, like the corporate life, I felt was not very inspiring to me. Like it was just too corporate. Like it was just, it felt too much like, you're building a business like every other business out there, like, a big corporation. And it didn't feel as personal as probably I would like it. Like as a company, like that really is maybe as idiosyncratic as I am, as my team is. So you kind of felt you're fitting a mold that maybe I didn't want to fit.
Yeah, I get that. There's a saying sometimes, which is like, sometimes it's like you're cosplaying a public company, right? But you don't really need to do that, right? Like that's like the important thing is this thing right here. Like let's focus and let's get this piece done. So very much with you. What is it like building software in 2025 versus when you start off like a little while ago? Like are you using a lot of AI tools? Is it like smaller teams, high leverage? Is it nope? Got to be this. You still got to do you still have to do it the way we did it.
Yeah, it's very different, I think, now. AI definitely makes things faster to prototype, I still think, though AI doesn't solve all the problems that are there, like I think, there is a big divide right now in the engineering world about like, should you use AI to build, 99% of it and then just make sure it works? Or should you use AI to build 75% or 80% of it and then build the rest yourself? I'm more in the 75-80% camp, I think, because I'm a big fan of reliability and a big fan of resilient systems. And, coming from the enterprise world, where like, a single bug could like kill like, $10 million deal, right? Like, I'm used to building apps and building products that like are resilient. And so, I'm not, and so when many people like, I get annoyed when like a lot of like product people or engineers in Silicon Valley talk about like, well, I built this great app in like 1 hour or whatever. I'm like, well, how resilient is it? Like, is it actually going to be useful to anyone, or just like, are you just like kind of scratching your own itch and like just feeling good about yourself that you build an app that really no one's going to use because it fails like 10% of the time, So it is easier to build like initial prototype of things but it's not necessarily a reliable thing. It's not necessarily like a great thing. I think great things still are, probably a little bit faster to build than before, but not like, not dramatically faster.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that as sort of an engineer. Like when does that corner turn? So I don't know if you're like, coming from electrical engineering, computer science background, there was like placing and routing, there's grounding and shielding, there's all these analog circuit design, there's all these things that kind of like computers just couldn't do it. You had to have the human just like orchestrate it. And then suddenly like, the floodgate broke and you're like, nope, never going to do that manual again. So I don't know, do you see that Like, was there an example in the past where you're like, this will never be automated, and it suddenly got automated? And like, how does that compare to now?
It's a good question. I think if anything, automation has taken longer than I would have expected. Self-driving cars, for example, has certainly taken much longer than I would have expected. And again, it's this issue where getting to 80% was relatively easy, but getting to the last 20% was hard. Software development has taken longer than I've expected, I would say. So I would have expected a lot more things to be automated by now. I would say that's my view is automation is taking longer than I would have. I mean, we were working on some of these technologies like computer vision and voice AI, 15 years ago. So it's taken a long time. I mean, even things like restaurant orders, right? Like in many cases, you're placing orders manually, it's still today, to this day. So, I think a lot of things are taking longer. I am surprised that airports are adopting things like facial recognition faster. It's cool to see that. I would have thought the government would be slower to adopt some of these technologies. It's glad to see that they're adopting it. But, in China, facial recognition is everywhere already. So, they were 10 years ahead of this, right? So it's not, the technology was there. It's just I think a lot of it is actually human gaps, to adopt some of these things. What about you? What do you think?
There's an interesting quote that someone asked me a question. It's like, what does it feel like to be wrong about something? Right. And I don't know if it's a trick question, but how does it feel to be wrong about something? It feels exactly the same as being right because you can't tell. So whatever our conviction is right now about like automation or something, we can't tell because we don't know if we're wrong or not. It will unfold. But it's not a question. So I guess the question is it a when question or is it an if question? Like, do you think the software reliability, this 90% code, I think that's the question a lot of people have. Will it be 75% then build or 90% then build or actually 110% and then scale back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's, I think for simple things, like the software can do a really good job at, right? Putting together a basic website. I just built an incentive chart for my kid on Lutra.ai, where basically you press a button and she gets more points for tasks that she didn't want to do that she did, right? So, and yeah, that's cool to see that you can build a simple website, with a few prompts, right? So I think, that technology will only get better for sure, right? But it's still, I think AI is a little bit overhyped in many ways, and it's overhyped in the short term and underhyped in the long term, right? Long term is going to change everything, but short term it's not changing as much as probably we would have expected by now.
Really want to thank you for your time. Just where to reach you on socials, where to learn about Founders in Arms. Where are you? Where are you on socials, and where we can find more about your companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So people can find me on tribechat.com, and you'll probably get a DM from me when you join the app. That's what I do. Yeah, so I'm on there. And then I'm also at Rajat Suri on Twitter, and then Rajat Suri on LinkedIn. Easy to find in both. Yeah, I think that those are the places to find me. I'm pretty easy to find. And also we have a podcast, Founders in Arms. You can put that into Apple or Spotify. And yeah, thank you for having me. And this has been great. It's great to catch up as well.
Yeah, super fun. We'll keep all the links in the show notes. And thanks so much for inspiring this. This is the drop in the pond and the ripple in the water.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Nice of you to say that.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like this content, please join our LinkedIn group. Please thumbs up, please comment, please subscribe. We'd love to bring more of this content to you.